Hello and welcome to my session, Biases and BS Tactics for Responsible AI Living. This is Kimberly Owens, and I want to say a big thank you to Techqueria and all of the people making the summit happen last week. And thank you also for enabling me to get in my session after the fact. I was out sick last week and I'm still a little bit recovering, and so I am off camera, but I really appreciate the opportunity to still share what I had planned to with everyone. And there's a slight change. I had stated it was responsible AI workflows, but I changed it to living because I believe that AI is already impacting both our work and our personal life, including our communities, our government, our society, essentially everything. And so I'm going to be getting into what does that look like? What should we know? And how can we go about living our best life while taking into account the darker sides of AI? One thing this is not going to be is a doomer session. I will be pointing out quite a bit of issues with AI, but I believe that knowledge is power. And the more that we know what it is good at, what it's not, the issues that we need to address with the problems and how to overcome them, and also ensuring that we in the Latiné community are educated on AI, the good and the bad. So I'm going to be diving into first, what are AI's harms? And knowing about that, as I said, is essential to thrive, because once we know, and things are changing all the time, don't get me wrong. Once you think you know something, it changes. But it's really important to know all of the different areas so that you can then go into 2 and 3, how to address those issues to ensure that how you're using AI, how you're deploying it within your organization, how you're using it in your everyday life can benefit you, and you can address those problems ahead of time and not be constantly reactive. So part of that is the benefits of an AI council. I get into how that works if you are not familiar with it. And then going forward, what are next steps to ensure, again, that we are staying on top of how AI is influencing our personal and professional lives. So first, what most people are aware of, the main issue with AI is the bias. And that's because it's trained on the data from since the beginning of time, millions of books, movies, audio, everything that you can think of under the sun. And we have lived, let's be honest, in a racist society, a misogynistic society, an elitist society, things like that. And so, of course, it's going to reflect in the results of AI. The key example I'm showing here is actually from a fellow presenter during Techqueria, Juan Manuel Contreras. He presented the results of a report that they did. The link this report can be found in Medium Post, and hopefully we can include a link in the show notes or the notes for this video on YouTube to that. But I really wanted to point out how going through the testing of this is so essential to find things like gender bias, which can influence everything from healthcare to hiring to qualifying for a loan. And again, race can play into that as well. This is a test I did today on both Google Gemini and ChatGPT. So I didn't go to the extent that Juan did with 13 different platforms, but I put in a super simple prompt. Create an image of an American family in 2025. ChatGPT had a real time with this. As you can see, there's like an error message. It took forever to come up with this image, and it basically shows like a mixed marriage family. a white spouse with her white child and a black spouse with his black child. So that was interesting. Google did a little better. I think it's hilarious that they show the baby holding an iPad. You know, it is 2025, and the kid has got a VR set on it. But I also noticed that the picture in the background is of a totally white family, and it doesn't look anything like them. So I thought that was funny, but not great, right? Not great. Then when I did the prompt, create an image of an American family in 1950, it is all white, and it is generic middle class, you know, Leave It to Beaver kind of family here. And that's because, again, most of the TV shows back then were all white people. The magazine articles were mostly white about white people. I mean, everything was focused on white people, and you know, brown and black people weren't in the main diaspora, and so not surprised by that either. Okay, AI and privacy. This is privacy in tech is an issue already, and I think AI is just going to exacerbate it. Larry Ellison of Oracle, he he stated this at, I believe it was a company meeting a year ago, and he's all about AI powered surveillance. This is an article from 404 Media from last year. 404 Media has been doing great reporting. And he stated that because of AI surveillance, citizens will be on their best behavior because we're constantly recording and reporting everything that's going on. That's straight out of like China. And we are in this country, in the United States, definitely moving towards this kind of AI on always surveillance state. Just being real, okay? When it comes to how are corporations thinking about AI and privacy, because you have to think about how their solutions are being used by their clients and their stakeholders, and even internally. They're one of the companies I'm seeing, along with Cisco, and I'll show an example of Cisco later, who are really actually investing in a lot of education on addressing issues in AI, and privacy is one of them. So these are the key things that they point out. Use of data without permission, that's a huge one. Unchecked surveillance and bias, also huge. I mean, these are all huge. Data leakage is actually a real big problem. There is ongoing concern that there is not enough emphasis on cybersecurity when it comes to the implementation of some of these AI platforms. There was a story also regarding AI security back in February of this year, where a employee of Disney downloaded an AI tool from GitHub, did not vet it, just assumed that because it was on GitHub, it was already vetted, deployed it, and 6 months later was caught in a malware scheme where they were holding his data hostage, and included company emails and a bunch of other things. And, he ended up losing his job. All of his private information was exposed. It was a real hot mess. And it really did have a horrible impact on his life. So these are the kinds of things that we need to be aware of constantly. Of course, there's a lot of discussion around AI and mental health when it comes to chatbots. This is the story about the man who had an ongoing conversation with his chatbot on ChatGPT, and it told him how amazing his idea was and that he could make all kinds of money. And he actually looped some of his friends in to actually, seeing, making a company based on this mathematical equation that it said he had created, and had gotten his friends to maybe invest. And it wasn't until he actually took everything and put it into Gemini to check whether it was BS or not, and it was. And so he exposed all of his chats to the New York Times as kind of like, a use case of what he went through and how it really was delusional. And this is a quote from somebody who used to work at OpenAI, and he posted on his Substack as Stephen Adler. I have now sifted through over 1 million words of chatbot psychosis episodes. And so believe me when I say the things that ChatGPT has been telling users are probably even worse than you think. Oh no, I do not see the image. This has been going on in Canva lately, where the image shows up, but it's not in the presentation. So what this is supposed to be a picture of is an interview with Tristan Harris from, he's the founder of Center for Humane Technology, and he had an interview with Jon Stewart of The Daily Show. And Jon Stewart has his head in his hands when he learns that Tristan had mentioned that there was a quote from the former CEO of Netflix saying that our competitor for Netflix is sleep. So people spending all of their waking hours on Netflix is their ideal, but it's not totally ideal because we want them, the competitor is sleep. And this is what Tristan is saying to Jon Stewart, so just imagine this, is that the competitor to ChatGPT is real people and real experiences. So they want to be that replacement for your friends. They want you to confide all of your deepest, darkest secrets, because then they get more data. And the problem is that those conversations recently were leaked. So going back to the privacy issue, you could find them in Google search. And so this is what I mean. Like, we have to be aware of these things, and we have to be testing these things constantly in our own use, in our daily lives, to make sure that we aren't negatively affected. And then on top of that, aside from psychosis with chatbots, it's just the mental health overall. So people, there's thousands of jobs going away, and especially in the tech industry, but in other industries as well, as a result of AI. And it's not nearly as bad as it's going to be, and I'll get to that in a bit. But there's also this, this threat of use AI or else, right? Without always, you can't assume that the company is going about deploying AI in a responsible way, that it's giving people the training that they need, that it's leading them in how to do change management, how to change what they're doing normally without AI, and how to augment AI for their work. I mean, you can't assume that all of the companies all across the board in every industry is doing this in a way that benefits their workforce. And so they're spending, 1.5 trillion in AI adoption, but then they're turning around and probably giving them a wellness, they're 100 billion in wellness, but what if that's just another AI app? It's just like that's not really. It's a drop in the bucket, obviously. So what do? So a number of companies, including tech companies, have been deploying what's the NIST framework, and that is a framework that is renowned across the globe. So it's not just for some kind of federal compliance, because there is no federal compliance right now. It is something that is a framework, it's a guide. It is not something that is related to any kind of regulation whatsoever, although it is within the umbrella of the federal government. So these are the key areas of it. So transparency, fairness, accountability, and robustness. So transparency, how is AI being used? Like, explain it, how AI can impact relevant stakeholders. Fairness, how are you addressing and mitigating bias within your AI models or your AI solutions? Say you have an AI solution that's on top of a model, is using an API from ChatGPT and the like. How are you addressing bias and any potential issues in order to best serve diverse populations, women, people of color, people in other countries, etc. Accountability. So, what are your responsibilities and governance structures to address potential AI risks? And then also the robustness. So making sure that you have secure systems in place, you have resilience and backups, and you have cybersecurity policies in place to address threats to your system and that of your stakeholders. Why it's needed? Well, I think it is obvious, but I'm pointing them out anyway. And honestly, I just believe that it's just good business to have responsible AI practices and governance. You're protecting your business, you're protecting your company's reputation, how you work, how you serve your clients. Like Disney was really impacted by that in a negative way. And even if they had, which I would expect that they would have, these governance practices in place, how is that ensured across the board with all employees? What kind of training? And I'll get into that in a second. But it's just good business to ensure you're addressing risk, that you are adhering to regulations. Now, granted, there aren't AI specific regulations on the federal level, but you've got regulated industries, finance, healthcare, telecom. They have to still, and those are some of the ones that have not done as many aggressive deployments of AI, but they're taking their time, and that's a good thing. Also, the NIST is a recognized standard across the globe, and so by adhering to it helps you to make sure that you're meeting the regulations outside of the US, including the EU AI Act regulation. So, it's just about protecting your brand, protecting your stakeholders, and protecting your business. So one of the ways you go about leading an AI implementation and doing it in a responsible, thoughtful, smart way is to set up an AI council. So what does it do? It provides a core team of people for the AI implementation to establish a strategic direction, taking account into all of the existing ethical guidelines that you have. Say you are a regulated industry, it's taking into account all of your existing regulations. It helps to drive adoption of AI across the organization in a more methodical and more effective way. It ensures that AI advancements support transparency, inclusivity, and it really benefits the stakeholders. And it also helps to provide and coordinate AI literacy throughout the organization. So, what are the do's and don'ts about using certain AI tools? How do we go about, going from point A to point Z when it comes to implementation? How do we implement without disrupting what our business already is. And that includes security, privacy, data integrity, etc. So how do you get started? First, decide who's going to be the governing body. And this is typically led by a chairperson. Now, I belong to a fairly new kind of group where it's a bunch of different people from different backgrounds. Some people work for companies, some people are solo consultants like myself. And one person shared with us this week that her goal in getting the AI Council going was for her to do it as a full-time job. So she volunteered to be the chairperson to kind of lead the charge. And then she went about inviting multiple stakeholders, coworkers from various departments. It's all really essential that there is a variety of stakeholders involved. And it really depends also on the size of the company. So say the company the size of an IBM, they probably have multiple AI councils, where a company that's, 500 people, 1,000 people, they might just have one. But you want everybody in there. Because again, AI is impacting everything. So you want people from IT, from engineering, from product development, marketing, legal, obviously, legal, IT, but also procurement. You have to decide, it helps to kind of establish what are the guidelines for procuring AI solutions. What of our vendors are using AI? How are they sharing their best practices, their responsible AI practices, and operations with us? How is that going to impact our company? It also enables you to create these AI initiatives, which could be AI literacy, implementation, like getting use cases from each department and then testing them out, in a safe way for then deployment into your actual workflows, and then also monitoring progress along the way. Having quarterly reports, what are our KPIs? How are we going to go about reporting our progress? What were the pitfalls? What were the successes? What did we learn? Sharing those learnings is absolutely essential. And then again, establishing AI literacy tracks and analyzing what is your tech stack within your organization. Where can you use, or what of your vendors, going back to vendor management, what of your vendors are implementing AI into solutions that you're using, be it, a SaaS platform, accounting, what have you, to do a true assessment of everything so you can monitor everything along the way. And then obviously establishing use policies for governance and processes and incorporating that into your ongoing training initiatives in AI literacy. So an example of something that I expect would be in the AI Council for IBM is AI privacy best practices. So this is something that they do, and they actually refer to something from the federal government. And this is the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. There is a typo in there, I just noticed. Sorry about that. And so, going down the line, they conduct risk assessments, they limit data collection, they confirm consent, they follow their inherent and probably evolving security best practices, and they address sensitive data and data collection storage. And so that makes it much easier when their organizations can then comply with regulations and also, again, build trust with their stakeholders. Really essential. So some other examples, Walmart has their most of these policies are public. And so Walmart has one. Accenture, who's making a buttload of money right now, or has actually for the last couple of years, leading AI deployments and integration projects for, the enterprise, Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies. And they all have similar things. So security, privacy, fairness, accountability, compliance, data privacy, cybersecurity. These are all things that are really essential. And I really love the one about human by design, understand AI's impact on humans. Yeah, what a concept. Ensure that our impacts are identified and managed. Yes, thank you. Consider the impact on the planet. Deploy with steps to mitigate any impacts. Thank you. Yes, we want that. Here's one where IBM did a responsible scaling for PepsiCo. So here they are sharing how they did it. They compared, doing an ad hoc Gen AI deployment and one leveraging their central platform. So another one here is Cisco. Cisco is very much about not only responsible AI, but also inclusive design. Had a conversation with them a couple of months ago, and they're all about it. And it's good when you don't take these things into account. It's going to reflect on the services that you provide your customer and the world. And the more inclusive and responsible you can be, the more successful you can be as a company. I truly believe that. So, about your everyday use, these are a few things that I take into account. So, thinking about data level bias mitigation. So that can be reflected in prompts. You can incorporate anti-bias prompts into your strategies. This one is an example from Next Gen Learning, and it's designed specifically to address special education. And you can see here that they are referring to specifics regarding special education, SEL and UDL principles. Where you can state specifically, I expect responses that are insightful, bias-free, and rich in reasoned analysis. So, as much as the models are getting better at understanding what you want without as much, the whole prompt engineer thing was a full-time job for a hot second. That came and went, but prompting is as essential and as important as ever, and it's going to be, I expect, for quite some time. Another area for practical use of responsible AI practices is just transparency in training data sources, making model adjustments and evaluating the results, and then constantly doing the fine-tuning. And this is something WorkSlab, which has come up in the last few weeks. And essentially that's been a result of people. I'm thinking there's probably people are just, again, going back to the mental health and workforce. I think people are still very overwhelmed, say they didn't get the training that they needed. They're being forced to use AI without a lot of guidance, or threats from their job, or, maybe they're just burnt out. But whatever the case is, they're using, say you're using a tool like Gemini's deep research, or even OpenAI's deep research, and it looks really good, right? It comes up, you do the whole thing, and it looks really good, and you're like, wow, this is really pro, and you basically just copy and paste it, and you send it on to your coworkers, and you didn't check the citations, and you didn't check anything, and it made up stuff. I mean, it still makes up stuff. Hallucinations is still a thing, people. It really is. Not too, 4 weeks ago or what have you, I went on a trip to Seattle, and I said, give me some tips that are, things to do in Seattle that are walking distance. And it gave me something that was a 5-hour walk away, a dog park, because I had my dog with me. Did I ask it, what is your idea of walkable? No, but I did after. So I'm saying, like, you have to be so vigilant with these things because, what works on one model, you could get total crap output. And you have to be, again, discerning. And I'm not trying to preach to anybody here. It's just I'm basically talking to myself after years of doing this. I just have realized that it's never done. Like, the learning is never done. Also, think about your data, your own data, and your own privacy. I personally, and this is just me, I am not going to use any chatbot for my diary or things that I do not want the company to know about me. I'm just not. But that's me, right? I don't want to see my chats. OpenAI did fix the problem, but I don't. I guess it's just you have to really be careful about how you use these things, and also try to stay on top of ongoing changes. It is tough because believe me, I use the news app on Apple, and I have a specific filter for AI on there, and there's probably 50, maybe 100 or more, I don't even know, articles a day on all the changes in AI. It's tough, but try to do your best. I haven't had a chance, but I'm gonna try to use the OpenAI tool of Pulse and see if that can help me to try to stay on top of all of the changes going on. And so, what to keep an eye on moving forward to support human-centered AI. So this is the part where it's affecting our personal lives, right? So AI regulation. Earlier in the summer, the big crappy bill was snuck in a moratorium on AI federal regulation. That was thanks to Ted Cruz. And a number of Republicans actually came out later and said, oh, I didn't know this was in there. I'm not really happy about that. And so when the bill was finally passed, that part of the bill was nixed 99-1 in the Senate. So what does Ted Cruz do? He introduces a new act, the Sandbox Act. That's essentially waiving federal regulation for AI developers on the federal level for up to 10 years. So it's the same thing, essentially, kind of. This is a quote from Public Citizen. The bill puts public safety on the chopping block in favor of corporate immunity. Surprise, surprise. AI regulation on the state level. Since we don't have federal AI regulation, it's all up to the states. Is this ideal? No. It is a myriad of different regulations. And, I kind of feel for the AI companies in that they're having to deal with this patchwork of regulation across the country. But hey, because they've been adamant against any regulation of any kind, and the federal government is not going to do anything about any AI regulation, or at least this current government isn't, then it's left to the states. And so there's two bills that have been pending at the governor's desk. One of them just got signed in the last week, and one of them he has until the 13th of October, so a few more days to sign it. I don't know about 1064, but SB 53 was signed, and it's essentially, it is the first of the nation bill. California is kind of known for setting precedent for tech regulation. We have a very strict privacy policy in the state. And so I'm not surprised that we're leading the charge here. It is requiring that large AI companies, are very transparent about their technology, and it's also about being transparent about their own safety protocols, but also to have whistleblower protection for the employees at those companies. So that's absolutely essential. 1064, on the other hand, it is focused on safety for children, and especially with what I had mentioned earlier about Meta and how they have Meta had released their chat companions, and actually both their lawyers, so legal was involved in this policy document, and their director of AI ethics, and they okayed and greenlit the fact that this chatbot could have sexual kind of provocation with users up to the age of 8, so 8-year-olds. And I think this is in response to that and a number of other things. So it's led by those that are advocates for child safety, and it would ban companies from offering AI companions to children unless they are not foreseeably capable of engaging in potentially harmful contexts, such as encouraging self-harm or engaging in sexual exchange. There has been heavy lobbying against both of these in Sacramento for a number of months, if not since the beginning of the year. And so I'm not sure about whether 1064 is going to pass or not. It has always been involved in politics and lobbying since the early days of the internet, and I'm sure before that. I didn't track it prior to that, but they have been. And it's going to continue to get more significant. I think this $100 million in that, OpenAI and Dreesen and so forth have launched as far as a super PAC. I think that's a drop in the bucket. Meta AI is also started an AI super PAC, and they really want to do to the midterms what the crypto industry did to the 2024 election. Essentially, really running anti-ads against anyone who is pro-regulation, and only putting forth candidates and putting money behind candidates that are soft on regulation and pro-AI adoption at all costs. And I just think this is going to continue to exacerbate over time. AI data centers. So if you haven't been hearing about this has been also a huge focus over the last few months. Business Insider did a really in-depth article. They were recently interviewed. The journalist was recently interviewed on Amanpour and Company on PBS. They did a really extensive investigation into all the different data centers that are popping up across the country, the impact on the environment, the impact on people's water supply, impact on people's utility bills. And, one of the quotes that I found very intriguing here is that despite the center's enormous water needs, so they are using drinking water to cool down the centers, not wastewater, drinking water. And you can see Arizona has a bunch, New Mexico, California, all drought influenced states. So 40% of them are in areas with high water scarcity. Cities and states give away millions in tax breaks to build data centers, with relatively few full-time jobs promised in return. Locals are left living next to industrial complexes that operate 24/7. So you've got noise pollution, right? You've got light pollution. Like these are very, very bright data centers. And people like in Texas, they barely have any water coming out of their faucet, and it's bright lights all the time. And then they're having to pay for it. Yep. So this investigation by A More Perfect Union uncovered how tech companies are doing backdoor deals with utility companies to offset the infrastructure costs and power costs to taxpayers. So this is a screenshot of a woman from the story whose bill went up 100% month over month. It went from $45 a month to $85 a month. Yeah. And you can see like this house, how close it is to the data center that's just the northern part of that image. Yeah. Oh, and then there's jobs. So AI and jobs, yeah. Big impact. And these are kind of, the quotes about this are coming from the frontier model CEOs themselves. So Ario Amade is, he's trying to warn people that unemployment is coming for white collar jobs, and especially entry level white collar jobs. Sam Altman also said that there is going to be a huge replacement of people. Some CEOs are making, are gleefully sharing how many people they have laid off as a result of AI. Not great, but tech CEOs, yeah. And then there's some kind of drawback for sure, but not necessarily pushback. Some are realizing they've made a mistake. Klarna was a really popular or really well-known one. A couple of years ago, they wanted to be the poster child for replacing people with AI through OpenAI's platform. And then they had to turn around and hire people back because the AI was failing. And this goes back to responsible AI practices. Like, don't get rid of your people before you've really tested everything. You've mapped out a plan. You've looked at all of the ins and outs, the good and bad, and test and test and test before you release it into the wild. Again, it's good business practice to do that. And even though Amazon has laid off, I believe, and don't quote me on this, but I believe they've laid off like 27,000 people in the last 2 to 3 years. The CEO of their web services says it's stupid to not hire entry-level people because these are the employees that are the least expensive, people right out of college, of course, and they're the most knowledgeable on AI, right? It's true, the 20-year-olds, the people in college and people in high school, those are the ones that, the digital natives, this is going to be like a breeze for them as opposed to the C-suite. So something that was really encouraging, because I've not heard any of our people in Congress talk about this, and if they have, I've missed it. But Bernie Sanders came out and he shared a document created by his committee that's focused on jobs, that millions of jobs are going to disappear. And he's quoting again the CEOs from the frontier models, right? So some of the stats he's stating here, according to ChatGPT, AI could replace up to 97 million jobs in 10 years. He's citing how corporations are already cutting jobs. Amazon, Walmart, United Health Group, JP Morgan Chase. AI companies admit their goal is to lower labor costs. They consider it a tax. It has been quoted that they consider human labor to be a tax. And you know how corporations hate taxes. And then, of course, the current president, he's definitely making things way worse. You've got people in the federal government that are pro AI who are denying that AI is going to affect jobs, which is BS. Again, BS. So the solutions he has here, I think, are fantastic. I hope when we get our government back that we can make some of these things happen. It's important for us to be aware of them and to keep pushing them and to keep, a 32-hour work week. Since we're much more productive with AI tools, can we finally realize a 32-hour work week? Or is the companies going to just push us to do even more work in the same amount of time? In expanding employee ownership, I think that's amazing. I mean, all these things are amazing. Guaranteed paid and family and medical leave. But it's all just a challenge in this current capitalistic shareholder, above all, not stakeholder capitalism. I'm not holding my breath, but I love the fact that it's being addressed. And I think this is going to be huge going into the midterms next year. Also, this talk of UBI, universal basic income, I am not at all. I think a 32-hour work week is more feasible than UBI. This is a quote from Mark Andreessen, Mr. A16Z guy, who's highly influential in not only the tech space, but in politics, in AI, of course. And he's also a staunch shareholder capitalist and libertarian. They, A16Z, rebranded themselves in the image of Fountainhead and Ayn Rand, right? So he thinks that universal basic income would turn people into zoo animals to be farmed by the state. So as much as I think OpenAI has talked about their nonprofit really being, a wealth of money, $1 trillion, nonprofit and doing UBI, yeah, I'm not holding my breath on that either. And also, what would their standard be for a basic income? What if your monthly expenditures is 10 grand if you live in San Francisco or New York or LA or what have you, have a mortgage and 2 kids and et cetera, et cetera? Like, what is universal basic income? Then you get into AI in the economy, and there's been a lot of discussion of the AI bubble, especially in the last few months. As one who experienced the dot-com bubble firsthand in 2001, being in the Bay Area, growing up in the Bay Area, I know what that house of cards looks like. And this is a definite concern. The GDP is typically driven by consumer spending. And that's not the case right now. Software and related tech expenditures are typically around 6%, and GDP is 70% driven by consumer spending, and it is upside down now. So it is just something that, if I'm not saying all the AI companies are going to go away, because that is not going to happen. I don't believe that's going to happen. But I believe that there's a lot of companies that are either going to be put out of business by some of the frontier models, kind of doing what I call the Apple influence, or where Apple says, "Oh, that's a good idea. I think we'll do that," and then boom, that company's out of business, and companies like them. But also, you can only be spending so much for so long without any profitability, where the money stops coming in, where you can't get investors anymore. And that's what happened during the dot-com boom. And so This is something definitely to keep an eye on. So what is our action plan? So think about how you use AI in both your work life and your personal life. Spend time on AI literacy for yourself. If you're not getting it from your company, do it on your own. If you're a solo consultant, solo entrepreneur like me, spend time educating yourself, staying on top, because you will need it. And you also need to also be aware of you learn by doing, and so you learn the challenges and how to overcome them by doing. Also, advocating for responsible and ethical AI, whether it's in your organization or if you're a consultant, with your client base, and especially in our own communities, right? Stay on top of elections and regulation and our elected officials. Who is behind AI regulation? How is the money, influencing them? We can, people have way more power than we realize. Look at what happened with Disney and freedom of speech. People came out in droves, canceled their subscriptions, marched in the streets, things like that, because our First Amendment is very, very important to us. We have power. Let's use it. And also support the Latiné community members that are doing great things in AI. Let's stay active in the AI Slack channel. Share what we have going on. Share how we're leading in our own organizations. And if there's startups that are Latiné based, there's a lot of money that we have a huge economic impact, not only on this country but on the world. I think Salesforce is recently announced that they're investing billions in AI in Mexico and other Latin American companies, and there's many more companies that are going to be doing the same. So we need to take advantage of that, of our economic power and our power overall. So I hope you enjoyed this. Please stay in touch. Please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm going to try to be getting more active on LinkedIn and sharing what I'm learning and sharing in the community on Slack as well. Muchas gracias to Techqueria, to all of you for listening, and I hope you stay safe and see you on the internets. Haha.